What were you saying? I'm sorry, anything else you want to say for the record? All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for the first technical working group for the Broward Safety Action Plan, the first TWG in 2025. And we have a full year. I was on vacation for a few weeks and came back, and I feel like I can't even breathe yet because there's so much going on. But we're, I think, making forward progress. We have a pretty full agenda today, and we want to encourage you to interact with us today. Rochelle and Desiree, who's online, and some of the others, and Rick, I prompted you to get you some, so that you're not caught totally off the cuff when I want to ask you some questions later on, but we'll judge that. Everybody. You are good off the cuff. I know that. Oh, anyway, okay. So thank you all for joining us. Christine Fanchi will lead us through the agenda. But before we do, online we have both Desiree Curry from Broward Health North and Cecilia Valoria. Did I say her last name right? Okay. With representing private business interests. So I don't know. Let's go.
Happy 2025. We are going in the year that we're going to adopt the Broward Safety Action Plan. So to James's point, let's go. Today we're here to talk about a few things. I'm going to start with just a quick review of what we accomplished in 2024 together, and then talk about how we're going to get to adoption. Then I'll jump into the approach to zero, just kind of a reminder, and then a date has been set. And then I'll hand it over to Michelle Kendall on my team. She's going to talk about the report card and our safety dashboard. And then we'll hand it over to James, and he's going to do a really interactive discussion about how we tell the story and how we have a broader reach to get to zero. So really quick, welcome. What did we achieve in 2024? And these are just the things that we completed. So of course, we're working on a lot more things. We finished our PM and public participation plan. We, of course, finished our safety analysis in about May, then our equity analysis in May as well. Existing conditions report was done this summer. We created our HIN and HRN mapping. So we have those available for use, as well as our equity mapping. We completed 10 technical working group sessions. Thank you very much. Appreciate all your attention and support. We also did 4 oversight committee meetings. We created our website, our project website, safestreets4broward.org. We completed at least 3 of the focus plans: school, rail, and lighting. And then associated with our 11 priority corridors, we did the safety analysis, equity analysis, and corridor crash diagrams for each of the 11. So 11 of those separate documents. We also walked together doing road safety assessments on those 11 corridors. So completed those. And then we did all of our public meetings in September and October for all of our 11 corridors. So great work. Thank you, team. So what's next? In the spring, we are going to finalize the remaining action plans. We've got 5 remaining: neighborhood, safe speeds, technology, mid-block, and ped bike. We also have an existing policies analysis we're going to complete, as well as we're going to create a safety dashboard, which Michelle will explain, as well as our report card. And then in April, we're going to adopt an executive Broward Safety Action Plan, the board. You want to say something? Okay. And then this summer, we are going to support Broward County on a submission for a implementation grant with SS4A for 31st Avenue. We're also going to finalize our 11 priority corridor packages and do our quick build designs for 10 locations. And then this fall, Safe Streets Design Manual. Very excited about that. 1,000 Little Things program. We're also going to do a safety roadshow to the public. So we're going to go around. We're going to need your help to understand what opportunities we have. The intent is to go where the people are. So letting us know where events are happening so that we can go where the people already are and talk to them about safety and what they can do and what we're doing to share the love. And then last but not least, we're going to do a Safe Streets Design Manual Practitioner Roadshow where we'll go around the county. I'd love to get with you on how we can get maybe like a regional training, maybe do one in Miramar, and then you can host the cities near you, do one in Hollywood, host your cities. And so we'll do a roadshow, go through the Safe Streets Manual. So I'm kind of putting that together, but the intent is to share the love across Broward County and touch as many people as we can. So that's the intent of what's next. I want to formally invite you. We have our final public meetings coming up in the month of February. We have 9 meetings over 3 weeks. So pretty intense.
Can I just throw out it's final for the priority corridors?
Final for the priority corridors.
A lot more to come.
Sorry. Yes.
Scott, can you please use your mic? Sorry.
The last slide showed concept plans in summer.
Uh-huh.
These meetings are in February, so we're going to the public before we have concept plans.
No. So the last public meeting, we just showed them an aerial, right? And we showed them the data analysis and things and said, where are you having issues? This meeting is to come back to them and show them a concept and talk through how it relates to the issues they were having, take their comments, and then update the concept so we can put together a package. The intent is in April to have a package that includes all the analysis, the design, a cost estimate, a cost benefit, package that all together and send it to you, Scott, for your review and final comment, and then get that back and finalize it in May.
So that's final concept. The one you'll be showing to the public will be like draft concepts.
Correct.
Okay, thanks for.
Did I say different though? So draft concept in February. Yes.
I get it. now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Also, you all should have hopefully received an email from me this morning with the dates, and the dates are also posted on our website, safestreets4broward.org. In case you want to spread it to hopefully your other colleagues or other organizations that you might be aware of that might be interested in attending.
Quick question. Is it a similar setup as far as these meetings go, like the initial ones?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. We'll do a presentation real quick. Then we'll break out into table sessions, right? With the roll plot. We'll have all the boards. We're gonna have different boards even this time. And I'm gonna bring out the other ones too, just if people missed that one. But there should be lots to talk about. So I'm really excited about kind of presenting countermeasures and having conversations about countermeasures and safer streets. So.
And we're definitely hoping for more people on this final one, since we had a little bit more time to do some public outreach to try to get more agencies and other residents in the area notified.
And one more last comment since Jonathan just walked in. I know we've been emailing back and forth a little bit, DOT. I would like to reiterate our request in front of the group. As far as the state roads are concerned, we'd like to see the draft concepts before they're shown to the public.
Okay. Noted. Noted. That's the plan. Yep. You'll get them a week before is the plan. Spoiler alert. We are working as fast as we can.
Do you also plan another, like a third public meeting to present the final concept?
It's not in the schedule.
But do you
So as of right now, no. So we got a request from Hollywood to go back after. So that one is tentatively planned for Taft Street. You want to speak to that? Thank
And
you.
Tracy, your question was having a public meeting or some kind of forum to,
Because the first one, we did not have the concept, right? We want
right?
ideas from public. And the second one is to present to the public and the draft concept.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if you have a third one to show them the final concept.
So part of this process, the recommendations that are coming from the Safety Action Plan, we're going to look to include those in the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan for the Broward MPO. And Christopher, I'm glad you're here because you can confirm or correct. To get something in the MTP, we need to have various things to make it program ready, like the cost estimate, the concept, but there's also coordination with jurisdictional owners and a resolution of support from the local government. So we expect that we will need to go back to our local governments, Eric and Deerfield Beach and Rick and Hollywood and some of the others, and have those commissions give a formal resolution of support. I think at that time, we can figure out, do those cities want to have a public meeting or not? We don't have it built into the schedule, so if we can, we'll have to figure out, how that works best for them.
Yeah, and we're always looking for input for if you think there's a certain HOA meeting or a commission meeting you would like us to come present to, we'll be more than happy to try to accommodate those requests. But we need our partners to reach out to us about those opportunities because we may not be aware about those opportunities, and we also need, the technical staff at many of our cities and other agencies to, help us or be champions for some of these efforts so we can get to that point.
And one other nuance of all of this, and Christopher, I'm not blaming you for this, but you can explain it, that as we do these things, our funding process is long and laborious. And so we constantly face the issue of, we get a resolution of support from a city commission, and then it gets on our multimodal priority list, and then it gets into our draft tentative work program, and then to the tip, and then that's in the tip, it's programmed for design 5 years out, and then construction 6-7 years out. And so there's a gap, and the public doesn't always remember, or where did this project come from? We never heard of this before. Well, remember 5 years ago we talked, so that's something that we have approaches to work on, as it's programmed for design. Year 3, we have targeted to go back to the communities and say, hey, this is coming up for design. Do you need to do more outreach to your community? Do you need to confirm that this is the design? Do we adjust the scope now? So yeah, that's unless we can get super fast funding, like maybe as we get for 31st through a grant, some of these there's a lag, and we'll have to keep going back to the public. I don't know if you've had that with any of your projects, Tracy, where it's like, but remember we talked to you back in 2014, and it was,
Okay, we have those.
no problems.
They don't remember they were reached out.
Right, yeah. You show them their name on the sign-in sheet, and
Yeah, but well, because of 5-year work program,
Yeah.
so our project tend to be like, built in 5 years.
Yeah.
And they're not gonna remember something happened. in 5
yeah,
years.
so we have an approach of going back and revisiting it. And it'll be different, I think, at the city level. So again, Eric, you at Deerfield, working with your community, what works best for you in terms of your funding cycles and such. So, Karen, Rick.
Mhm.
Eric Power. This always happens. And it's not just about the residents, always about elected officials, because elected officials change. So I always, it's like when you get onboarding of new elected officials, so like, this is one of the things that I always do. Here's all the projects that are coming in like the next few years for elected officials, because that's the same argument they make. Or, we have turnover, everyone has turnover. So.
Good points.
Commission comes in and they get elected because they don't want a project. We've seen that happen.
Yes, we have. All right, I'm going to keep moving. So the next item is just to talk about our schedule to adoption. This is the executive Broward Safety Action Plan. I'm going to go through mine, or you want to go?
You do yours now.
Okay. So the intent is to get to the Broward MPO board in April, on April 10th, so that we can do the Safe Streets Implementation Grant in May. And so if you back out of that, we've got a lot of presentations and actions that we need to take backing up into starting next week. James is going to do a presentation to the TAC and the CAC for initial. Then it'll go to the Broward MPO board for an initial conversation in February. And then end of February, my team is going to create like a final packet of the executive plan to attach for the agenda so that we can present March 13th to the TAC and the CAC and the board. It'll also go to the TAC and the CAC, same presentation on the 26th of March. While that's the intent, February 28th, to go back a minute, the intent is to post it for public comment on February 28th and give it 2 weeks of public comment so that my team after 2 weeks can take the public comments, the board comments, update the plan again, and then create that agenda item March 28th for the April 10th adoption. So a lot of moving parts to get to April 10th.
And if I can elaborate a little bit. So We had some discussions. The consultant team did a very nice job of preparing an initial draft. We've talked about the outline of what we wanted to present. And as we looked at it and shared that with our MPO executive director, he wanted to fall asleep and had some recommendations on how to make it a document that our board members will be engaged with. So we're following a format of similar to what we did with our 2035 LRTP way back, that we did a user-friendly summary. So we're calling that the executive document, and it gives an overview of what's going on with the whole project. And this is what we will take to the board for approval. We need to make sure that it meets the requirements for the grant so that we can say we have an adopted plan. And then we will refer to a lot of technical information. You can see how thick this one is. And we may have 2 or 3 volumes of technical information. We found with the initial draft that we prepared, or that they prepared, that it was about 110 pages, and there was 2 pages for each focus plan. So that's 20 pages there, and then 5 or 6 pages for each corridor study, and that's 11. So, so it was about 70, 80 pages of just flipping through details of the projects. And so our executive director, knowing the board and how they will react to stuff, just tell them the big story, high level, but then make sure that we have the backup information. This approach, I think, will also be helpful as we're working out all the technical details. So Scott, you asked the question about concept plans and stuff. So we're going to the public in February, and we'll have concepts, but we won't have all the cost estimate. We won't have all the details worked out, but we will be adding that information to this more intense document as it goes forward. Same with our focus plans. So we'll have to strike that balance of saying enough about what the general recommendations and analysis show us, but making sure that it's something that engages our board members. So Christopher had that issue with the 2050 MTP recently, where how big is the document? 333 pages?
Really picking on me today.
Well,
Yeah,
and you don't even have a name tag, so I don't know why you're here. But
yeah, I agree. So I should just go. Yeah, no, our document's like 400, almost 500 pages, and I'm working on the executive summary right now. So,
yeah, so we took it all together to the board as one, and now we're separating it out. So then, once we get the approval so that the Broward County can apply for the implementation grant, we will compile all this stuff, and probably in the fall look to go back to probably our MPO board and to the Board of County Commissioners and say, hey, can you approve this all? And then we'll have conversations also about you at your local governmental level about what you want to take it and review and get approval and support from your boards. Any questions on that? I love my visual aids. As we started the conversation, I couldn't find these, and then I was like searching my bookshelf, but it helps to see the thickness and the. Okay, they're up here if anybody wants.
It's like show and tell. All right, if no more questions, I'm going to jump into our approach. So as we discussed in our August meeting, there's basically 3 types of commitment. You can have a political mandate like Miami-Dade County did. You can strategically select a year. So like Palm Beach County is doing 2035 and Metro Plan Orlando is doing 2050. So everybody can just strategically pick a year. We also talked about % decrease by a year. As you know, reminder, we're currently at a rate of 2% decrease per year, which is excellent. We're decreasing, but at that rate, it'll take us 406 years. So kind of doing the math kind of helped us inform the discussion. 50% is 10 years. That sounds really aggressive, right? 25 is kind of moderate. So at 2050. So kind of thinking about that, revisiting that. And then just noting that we need a holistic approach. So I put together this slide. You've got about 1,000 KSIs right now in Broward happening every year, about 225 fatalities and 775 serious injuries. So that's the number we want to get to 0. And so I put these measures kind of side by side to show that they are going to affect our goal at different rates. And it'll be up to us to measure what these actual percentages are, but I threw some together. So the first one obviously is low cost measures. So can we add LPIs? Can we restripe crosswalks to be high visibility? Can we do some traffic calming measures, in neighborhoods? Those are like low cost, quick, right? Opportunities. The major capital projects, redesigning complete streets, integrating, raised intersections and roundabouts and all that good stuff, major stuff. Obviously we'll have a huge decrease. And then speed management obviously is a huge part of getting to 0. That's holistic. That includes enforcement. So I know a lot of cities are putting out the speed school cameras, which is a part of that. There's also, we can paint, 35 miles an hour in the lane. That's very easy. That's a speed management strategy. So kind of those holistic speed are going to have a really good impact on our goal. And then reduce VMT is really like as we densify, I know we're talking about that a lot in at the MPO level. As we densify, the trips get shorter, right? As we live, work, play in the same area. And so your exposure goes down. So therefore, just by densifying, we're going to get a decrease. And then the last one, vehicle technology, is kind of out of our hands in this room, but that goes to, seat belts and airbags and smart assist and maybe some automated driving. So that's going to help. So like all of that together, hopefully will get us to 0. I put together kind of this list that kind of specifically talks about things that we can do in each bucket. This is not a holistic list, but there's a maintenance bucket of things we can do, like signal backplates. I think are pretty simple and inexpensive. LED lighting, I think we're already doing those things. High visibility crosswalks, I think we're already doing. So let's just amp that up, right? Policy, we're going to have the Broward Safety Action Plan this year. So the ask is that several of our cities will also adopt so that we all are working towards the same goal. We'll also have the Safe Streets Manual this year that you can adopt. Programs, as part of our focus plans, we've talked about a bike gap program, a trail crossing program, and then a BCT crosswalk alignment program. So aligning our stops with crosswalk infrastructure to reduce fatalities. Quick build, we're going to have 10 quick build projects as part of this project. We also heard a lot about traffic calming programs this morning. That's a huge, important part of getting to 0 is those traffic calming projects. Enforcement, I spoke about. Just wanted to highlight, I think really telling is that rail safety blitz that was done a few years ago along the FEC, 3 months of Broward County Sheriff, 0 fatalities. Like that's so impressive. So how do we do more of that? Maybe perpetuate it across our transportation system. And then projects through this project and others, we'll have 11 priority corridors ready to go into design. The low stress project, which is doing 5 projects and concepts. So those will be ready to be programmed. And then the county has the county intersection projects that'll also be ready to program. So we have things that are able to just be aligned and ready to go so we can achieve our goals. Additionally, the county gave me a challenge of like, Christine, what would it take like resources wise to get to 0? I'm like, that's a great question. So I did some math. This is not perfect, but I'll just walk you through it really quick. So our high injury network is 384 miles. It's 6-lane, 4-lane, and 2-lane streets. So I did an estimated cost estimate of what it would take to upgrade a 6-lane. You can see 4-lane and 2-lane. And then I did the math of like the 6-lane streets times, and that equals a total program need of 2.2 to 3.3 billion to do all 384 miles. And then I broke it out by jurisdictional owners. Sorry, cities, I can do it further, but it's cities altogether. So that's the need. And then I subtracted out 15% for the first 5 years, 15% each of the first 5 years, because as we all know, we have to program things before they can go into design and construction. So I said, okay, the first 5 years, we're going to program, which is free, but we're also going to do some design, some quick build and maintenance in that first 5 years. And then the remainder got divided by years, 2030 to 2050. So 20 years. And that equals Broward County, 42 million a year, FDOT 103 million a year, and cities combined 23 million per year need. We did have a conversation this morning, so I will kind of modify what I said, but I think there's a lot of programs, and I'll just say like Broward County intersection program, I think could integrate a lot of the Broward Safety Action Plan lessons into that program, which is being funded by the county, right? So I guess I just want to remind that I think FDOT has a ton of programs that already integrate safety. I know RRR, we were doing a lot of safety. Now we're kind of pulling it out, but I think there's an opportunity to even do that again. So there's already programs in place. So we can hopefully not need exactly, let's say $103 million more, but integrate it into existing and then see how much more we need. So this is just a starting point to start the discussion, obviously. Any comments, thoughts? If not, I'll let you think about it. So,
Christina, I have a quick question.
Of course.
The cost per lane mile,
Huh?
is that maybe an average of the bucket of improvements that
Mhm.
were listed earlier? I would imagine.
Yeah, so I took a best guess based on the 11 corridors that we're doing of kind of the type of improvements that we've been talking about with those 11 corridors. So like we've been talking a lot about shared use paths. So I put in at least one shared use path for the whole mile. And then I put in like at least maybe 2 raised intersections and 2 more raised crosswalks with signals for the 6 lane and then no signals for the 2 lane. Does that make sense? So this is me like guesstimating just to give us an order of magnitude. Tony Huey from the county asked for this calculation. I think it's really telling of like, just like what goes into it and gives us an order of magnitude of kind of the breadth and need so that we as agencies can just be informed of like what it's going to take infrastructure wise. Now this is infrastructure. This doesn't include like enforcement investment, even your maintenance dollars that you need. So this is not a holistic, we need $42 million a year. This is infrastructure, a beginning of infrastructure. The other question was that I was grappling with, 384 miles is 77% of KSIs in Broward County. It's not 100%. So this doesn't encapsulate 100% of KSI reduction, right? But the other 23% remaining is so sporadic that it'd be really hard to quantify. So this is a starting point. I had a number, so I started with this. So I think it just gives us something to chew on to make decisions and really be thinking about what it's going to take.
Yeah, and just adding on to what Christine's saying, I think James brought this up this morning, but what other agencies have done, they haven't really quantified it. They kind of picked a number out of the sky and said, that's the year that we want to aim for. Some of the guesstimating that Christine worked with the MPO and the county to try to come up with, a logical approach and see if it made sense. So that was very telling. But the other thing is that in all of our projects that we do, regardless if it's triple R or some other type of improvement, there are some basic safety improvements that we all do, right? Like we look at lane width reductions, we look at some of these other things. So trying to look at 8 or 2.2 billion, 3.3 billion as just safety projects, that's not really the approach that we want to take. We want to try to take an approach where maybe some of these low-hanging fruits can be incorporated as part of all projects, because FDOT over the next 25 years, they're definitely going to invest more than $2 billion that's in Broward County, right? The cities, with their projects, the 31 municipalities over the next 25 years are definitely going to invest more than $500 million total in Broward County. I believe this is, I'm not trying to minimize it, but this is like 2 years worth of surtax allocation or 3 years worth of surtax allocation. And you all do all these other types of projects already that are already programmed. So let's see how we can take advantage of these already existing funding sources to make these improvements and to help us drive down the number without looking at, oh, we need exactly $42 million a year from the county specifically for safety, or 103 million from FDOT, or 23 million from the cities.
Thanks, Pablo. Okay, and then we wondering about that big number, that 2.2 billion. We were thinking about what funding programs. So I put together this list. On the left is federal grants and then federal programs on the right. This is not a holistic list, but SS4A, RAISE grants, ATIIP, I think that's a new one, active transportation. And then there's transportation alternatives, of course, SMART grants, infrastructure, ATTAIN is technology, and then multimodal project discretionary grant opportunity. I think that's a new one as well. So there's lots of different grant opportunities. On the right, HUD, I'm aware of a lighting project in Broward being funded by HUD. So I just wanted to kind of plant that seed that they're also doing safety. FTA is a ton of investment. I know we're doing a lot of mobility hubs and first last miles in Broward. So FTA is funding safety projects as well, safety adjacent projects. CMAC funds and then FRA programs. I think we currently have 2 FRA grants in Broward. So a lot of work, a lot of opportunity here. And then I broke it down to the local, states, county, MPO, and city. At the state level, we have the HSLIP that Tracy mentioned earlier last year now. As a resource, we have Safe Routes to School. We have the safety push button with Jonathan. For smaller projects, we have school zone funding available to upgrade and implement school zones. We also have the high visibility enforcement grant that's available to local agencies through the state. The county has a signing and marking program that they do, as well as surtax, which includes school zone signalization, trails, and intersections. So a lot of different county resources there. Broward MPO obviously oversees the MTP. And so they have a safety bucket, which this project will be inserted into. And then they also have other buckets that include the C-SLIP projects that include safety measures. And then on the city side, of course, they have their CIPs. We heard pretty well this morning that traffic calming is a big element in most cities. So that's obviously a big part of our speed management goals. And then the speed radars are coming online for schools. And then I understand some cities like Hollywood are bringing back the red light cameras. So I wonder if that's an opportunity for funding. Did I miss any that you all can think of?
Just the safety push button under the state.
Huh?
That category, we don't actually have a safety push button. It's a regular like traffic operations. Yeah, I think that's something.
Oh, okay.
Probably more.
I feel like it's safety
but
related,
not
so,
those-
okay.
Yeah, it's
The traffic operations, thank you. Thank you.
I'll just add that, yeah, the MTP safety bucket is the designated mechanism for us to get safety projects funded through the MTP, but also kind of leaning on what Fazil was saying earlier is the opportunity that we have with all the other projects that we have programmed currently in the MTP to incorporate safety attachments to better realize the scopes of the projects. So what we have with the 2050 MTP are what we call route markers. And we currently use the high injury network as one of those route markers to identify those different projects that fall within the high injury network. And a lot of the projects that we have in the MTP right now are just names of roads with limits and not fully defined scopes. So when we go do our concept developments, specifically for our complete streets program, we'll then incorporate more safety features. So you could probably add here the complete streets program, not just C-SLIP.
Excellent, thank you. All right, I need to wrap up so we don't run out of time. So, big news, 2050 is our goal. So the good news is that this aligns with a lot of other metrics that we're doing. Just for saying our MTP, it's 2050, right? The national goal is 2050 through the National Safety Council, and then our regional MPO, our subtech goal is 2050. So this kind of aligns as the discussion went in August. It wasn't too, 2050 wasn't too aggressive, but it wasn't too lax. So it was kind of in the middle. So like Goldilocks, right? So in the middle, just right. So 2050 is our year that we're working towards. And so we need to figure out how to align all our resources to meet that goal. So I just wanted to kind of get concurrence that everybody's cool with 2050. Can I get a thumbs up? All right. All right. We're moving towards 2050. So with that,
Can I add one thing
of
there?
course.
So with the 2050 goal, we also expect to do an update of the safety action plan in 3 to 5 years, and we can revisit and look at the numbers then. We'll see a slide later on that talks about progress that other places, other locations have made in it, moving toward zero, but very few have actually got to zero. There's like Hoboken and a
Mhm.
couple of other places, but forward progress is better than no progress, I guess. I need to work on that one.
All right. So we'll talk about metrics next.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Kendall. I work with Christine and Selena and the team at WSP. Happy to be here with you this afternoon. I'm going to talk about data, which is one of my favorite things right now. So looking for another engaging conversation with you all. So one of the things that's really important for the Safe Streets reporting grant itself, as well as just from a practical standpoint, we want to know how we're doing. We've put all this work into it. How are we doing year over year? So there's 8 different components that we're required to be compliant with for the grant's purposes. The one that we're focused on right now is the progress and transparency methods. So two different things that we have to make sure to address in the Broward Safety Action Plan. One is a description of how the progress will be measured over time and what those outcome data are. They don't tell us, Federal Highway doesn't tell us how we have to measure it. We get to decide that. The point is we have to make sure that we're measuring it. And then the plan also needs to be publicly posted online. So that will be posted on the SS4A website. A couple of things that we're working on right now. There's going to be a safety dashboard. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then the annual report card. And the report card will be an actual published kind of summary document report card every year where we can see how we're doing year over year. The dashboard itself is going to be focused on mainly on Signal 4 analytics from their crash reporting system. I'll show a preview of that in a second. And then the report card will look at annual crash trends and then the infrastructure investments that we're making towards how we're getting to that goal. This is an example. It'll look similar to this, but this is not Broward. Just to give you an idea of what it could look like. I know we all love dashboards because it's really cool to kind of get in there and kind of play around with the data. This will give you the opportunity to look at what those KSIs are. We can look at them by mode. We can look at them by number of lanes and posted speeds. You'll be able to have a map where you can zoom in and kind of look if you're looking at a specific street or a specific jurisdiction. You can look at that. We'll have data where you can compare like year-over-year statistics, city by city, county by city. So all of that will be in here. We have a draft of that right now, and we'll be working towards finalizing that shortly. And so you'll be seeing that in a bit. So now we need to think about what our report card will measure. A lot of the statistics that you're going to see in the report card will be in the dashboard as well. We're going to talk about two different kinds of statistics. One are the actual crash statistics, and then the next one is going to be what are we actually doing in the cities and the counties to get there. So I'm going to go through these, and this is kind of a lot of information, so I'm going to go through a few slides, and then we're going to come back. So the crash stats are, and again, most of this is available through through Signal 4 with a couple of exceptions. We'll look at what are the annual fatalities, what are the annual serious injuries, what are the total KSI crashes, and then we'll look at those crashes by mode. So we get a sense of how are we doing? Are bicyclists improving? Are bike crashes reducing? Pedestrian vehicles, et cetera. We'll look at those crashes by the types of crashes and contributing factors. Is it speeding? Is it aggressive driving? Are they rear end crashes? Are they angle crashes? All of those different things we'll be able to look at. We can also look at it, and 6 and 7 are kind of related, not the same, but they are kind of linked. Look at the number of crashes by the number of lanes and posted speed, and then also by the FDOT roadway context classification. School zones, as you know, is one of the focus plans. So we want to be able to look at how are the KSIs doing in school zones. And you'll see on here, there is an asterisk after certain ones. So like I said, most of the data is available in Signal 4, but some of those would require a little bit of extra GIS analysis. So we could overlay the geographies so that we know where the school zones are, and then we can calculate the crashes from there. So all very easy to do. It's just process. We'd look at the crashes on local streets and the fatalities when it comes to railroads. So FRA is another data source. It measures things a little bit differently, but we'll be able to look at that. Speeding and nighttime crashes are kind of like underneath the realm of number 5, which are the contributing factors, but those are particularly important. So we wanted to call those out separately. Also in the FARS database, we're able to look at crashes by the age group, and we can look at those by the age of the drivers. And that's particularly important, as some folks have pointed out this morning, in terms of being able to target outreach to drivers of different ages and kind of get that messaging across. We'd also look at the KSI crashes in equity areas. And then we can look at, as I mentioned earlier, the cities with the KSI rankings from the highest to the lowest. You can look at it per just straight number and also per population. Now these are the ones that are going to require a little more effort on all of our parts to be able to get this here. So I want you to think about these, and then we're going to come back to them, and we really want to get your input on them. So these are the implementation measures. So when we do construction projects, we can say, okay, we've done these projects. And again, the goal is as we're increasing the funding in the projects that we're doing safety related, the crashes, KSI crashes should be coming down. So that's what we want to see kind of year over year. So we would want to look at the miles of projects that are planned or funded on the HIN or the HRN roads, the number of traffic signal upgrades that have been done, different signal timing improvements have been done, the number of new streetlights added or fixtures upgraded. We could look at the miles of road or road segments where the speed limits have been lowered. We could look at where are we adding new speed cameras? Where are we adding new speed feedback signs? There's also another, this isn't construction related, it's a survey, but there are a lot of areas where they do speed surveys to see year over year, are the speeds going down based on the countermeasures that we're putting in place? And then also important is looking at the number of school zones that have been implemented, as those have been particularly shown to reduce crashes. These are a little bit more focused on bike and ped. So looking at the number of lanes that have been narrowed in support of those multimodal improvements, where are we adding protected bike lanes or shared use paths? Where are we filling in sidewalk gaps or adding new sidewalks? Along with that, where are pedestrian refuge islands being added? What about crosswalks, raised, looking at new pedestrian crossings? Where are the bus stops being realigned with crosswalks and pedestrian facilities? And then when it comes to safe vehicles, where are we making improvements in fleet vehicles for safety enhancements? How much money are we putting towards safety improvements that have been funded by red light camera tickets? And then we can look at it in terms of the dollar value of investments in safety equity areas overall. Okay, so that's kind of a lot of a dump of data, different sources. So these are the questions that we want to talk about. What measures are priorities? What measures are we missing? How the information will be collected. That I have a feeling is going to be a longer discussion than just today, because we've had some preliminary discussions. There's lots of different ways to do it, but we really are going to need to think about, who is going to be able to collect the data? How is the data going to be collected? Just making sure that we have a process in place. And then we want to think about from anybody that's representing the health industry or from enforcement, is there anything that would be particularly helpful that we could measure that you could use in your reporting or your studies, different things like that?
And if I could just jump in, we have both Desiree Curry and Sasha Lavello from Broward Health North online, and you might be able to give us a perspective too, Rachel. So.
Okay.
Back the big picture.
Yeah, so as we're gonna be having these discussions in the next few minutes, it's also important to also think about it. Just because these are up on the screen doesn't mean we're thinking about doing all of these things. This is just to get all of us thinking about, what's important to our own organizations. What can we track that could be complementary to many of the efforts that you all are currently undergoing. And maybe there's some information that would be very helpful that no one has accumulated, that maybe we can do it on a yearly basis as part of this effort.
We had just kind of as you're kind of thinking about these, we had a really good conversation this morning about the Signal 4 and the other data. Sure. So, we can touch on these. These are the ones that are easy to collect. It doesn't require a whole lot of effort. So I think, would love to get your input on these. But what we really want to focus on is collecting the data in terms of the projects that y'all have completed. So any kind of general thoughts on the crash stats? Does it look like these are the right things to be collecting?
Anytime I make eye contact with somebody, that's an invitation to speak. So, Christopher.
Thought we were just flirting.
I just gave you a name tag. What else do you want? Come on. That's it.
There any near miss? Sorry, Mike Melendez over here.
Yeah.
Is there any near miss data opportunities?
That's a good question. I mean, what we have readily available are the statistical data. I know there's been more efforts to collect locations on near misses, but in terms of reporting, Christine, do you want to? Or Mintang? Perfect.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mike. We do plan to deploy some mobile units to select the intersection, but it's not going to be in a all across the board type of big extent of whatever exists right now. So it's only going to cover maybe a little bit more than a handful of the intersection, maybe. It's still in the planning mode to execute that contract. So I don't have too much detail to share, but something for sure, we don't have the full coverage. We only can select multiple intersection at one time. So, but we can make that data available for selected intersection, that's for sure. How's that?
Hi, Rachel from Memorial. So when I think about a dashboard, I don't know how you plan to lay it out, but like zip code data generally matters a lot to me. So that I can do targeted interventions in those communities where these crashes or incidents are occurring. So will this be filterable by zip code?
I think that's,
It kind of feeds into the health section as well for me. Like if I'm looking at a dashboard and I want to gear community outreach or education or some type of countermeasure, intervention, whatever it is, I have to know where it's happening to go. Like not necessarily specifically the cross streets or intersections that way, but if I know that there's an influx of crashes happening, let's say in one specific area of Hollywood, then I can try and find somewhere in Hollywood to provide education.
Yeah, so,
Sorry to call you out, just, Hollywood.
so the good thing is and someone correct me if I'm wrong, I believe zip codes are pretty static, right? That they're not gonna change. It's not like the boundaries of zip codes change unlike county districts or city districts. So I don't see why we couldn't get the GIS layer and input that and then filter it by the zip code if you want that information. Like, that's good to know.
In a similar manner with it's a GIS based dashboard. And so if you can apply different layers of GIS information, we can look at that. So it's zip code seems pretty static. That's how we're able to do the equity area too, because it's a static. We talked also, and I want to gauge your interest. We can do it by municipality. Would the municipalities like to know by commission district what's going on? If so, do they have GIS layers that we could bring in? Same with county commission districts. They don't always match up with city boundaries. The MPO districts do, but the county commission districts don't. So if there's a layer of the county commission districts, we could overlay that. One question that we got was, can we look at a corridor? Like if somebody wanted to loop State Road 7 within a certain segment, that's a slightly different question, but it's a question of how we can bring layers together. Eric?
Eric Power, I have a couple questions or a couple comments. Our dashboard, you can click on a street, it'll tell you the whole street. One of the problems like zooming in and out of the map is like you might not be able to see the entirety of, say, Hillsborough Boulevard, right? So like, you can actually just click on Hillsborough Boulevard and it'll tell you the answer. So that's something you can look at. We're not doing highways like 95 and Turnpike and
Let me ask you a question on your first one. Is yours an ArcGIS based dashboard? Okay, so that's something we can look at. Second, if you go back a layer, or a slide, or this, it's not showing here, but in Orlando, there is a layer where they can add the limited access expressways. So we didn't include those in our analysis, but there is a way.
that's what I wanted to ask, because I think like we just have we exclude I-95 and the Florida Turnpike from our map. Like, you have to kind of say that. I didn't know if we were adding it. I don't know if we were including it or not.
So this is all Signal 4 based data, so it's in there. And we know in this 5-year period, there were 300,000 crashes total and 250,000 were on the roadway system, 50,000 on
So
the.
you can, okay, so you can just tell.
And so it's a question of turning it
really
on.
skews. That's what the problem is. It really skews the issue.
But if it's as easy as flipping a switch or doing something on the dashboard.
Yeah.
You can turn it on or off. So yeah, they offer that option on the Orlando one.
Okay. Are we gonna include train fatalities? We are? Did we talk about that? Sorry. Something I'm working on right now too. It's not easy.
The Signal 4 doesn't track train.
That's the reason.
It's a different data set, as Michelle mentioned. So my sigh is that the data, it doesn't even align very well, as you know.
Why I'm asking, I'm being asked.
But we do have a train fatality problem in Broward, and so I don't want, and it's transportation. I don't want to exclude it. So I'm struggling with what's the best way. So I'm thinking if we just, they do fatalities and then injury and then no, right? I think they have 3 categories. So I think we could just report fatalities. It would be clean enough. And we would note that it's FRA data, not Signal 4.
I'm just having problems with it too. Like I can't tell like if it's pedestrian, if it's vehicle, like it's not accurate. Like you said, it's not really, it doesn't really have boundaries for like municipalities.
It's really hard. So
And
Oh,
if,
we're going to try to look at it.
sorry, if we can broaden this too, so there's a question of what do we want to track? So we can track the rail issues. Including it on the dashboard has a certain complication, but we still can track it.
I'll be honest, that was a really selfish question because I have to do it myself. That was the reason why I asked.
Okay, noted. All right.
I just 2 more quick things. I'm sorry. Wet dry is something that I know is on there, and I think that's a really interesting conversation. You know, we talk about it all the time in Florida and the rain, and the data doesn't really show that there's more crashes when it's raining, which is interesting. And then right now we're working on weekend because it's not in the data, but you can kind of pull it. You know, there's always the concept that more crashes occur like on a Saturday night and that kind of thing. And yes, vehicle crashes, like that's obviously when it's happening, but not so much like other types of things. So we're trying to play with that data a little bit. I don't know if it's something to think about.
And I'm sorry, you can't see it at this scale, but this can show all the crashes. So it highlights the KSIs, but once you zoom in, you can see all the crashes that occur.
Oh yeah.
And then there are filters based on what's in Signal 4. So it can do by time of day. It can do it by day of the week. It can do it by.
Yeah. So by day of the week, but I'm saying like you're talking like weekend and holiday kind of thing. We just been playing. We have such a small data set than obviously you do. And we've been playing with some of that data like weekend and holiday and things.
The way it's set up right now, I think it's day of the week. So you can choose Saturday, Sunday.
Right. Just the suggestion.
Josette, if you're done, Eric, since you're being selfish.
I was just gonna say, we had this conversation at City of Fort Lauderdale when I was Vision Zero coordinator. And when I approached Vision Zero Network and I talked to City County of San Francisco, essentially how it was treated was because crashes that the police do are motor vehicle crashes. The train, pedestrian, train, bicycle crashes aren't captured, as we all know, and that's why it's not in Signal 4 analytics. What San Francisco decided to do was not really count it towards their Vision Zero metric, but they did report it as a separate line item. I thought I'd mention that.
Good approach.
Rachel?
More question. So in terms of the like transit mechanisms, is there a way to split it also with e-bikes and scooters? So there's been this really big push in trauma centers right now to kind of focus on these motorized type of wheeled devices. And so in my brain, I just want everyone wearing a helmet, following the rules of the road, being predictable, all the things, right? But there is a push. So I've sit on a lot of national calls with all the trauma centers, and they are talking about a distinction in these groups, and they're finding that there's different behaviors. Like there was just a study that just came out in injury epidemiology about the time of day intoxication factors between cyclists and e-bike riders. And I think there are some behaviors that we can pay attention to. It just came out this week, actually, in injury epidemiology. It's a study out of Germany. So I'm just wondering if there's a distinction that we can separate those out, and then we can kind of address those differently. Just thoughts.
So that's an interesting thought. I don't know if Signal 4 right now gets down to that level of detail, but I have seen on long crash reports that I've read that they've noted, this was an e-bike. So I think that might be an evolution as to when that kind of data becomes available.
I think you're speaking to my heart, Rachel, because the crash data is only as good as the person inputting it and the data fields that are available. So this morning, like Katie Cares is with the state. She's our district safety administrator. She's working at a state level to talk to the people that are doing crash reporting. to make sure that we're getting the data that we need. So I think as part of this effort, we're not going to be able to track the difference between a bicyclist, whatever, regular bicyclist and an east. But James said we're going to update this in 5 years, and maybe by then we'll have the data.
The other thing I want to throw out, the MPO, we've talked about allocating resources, either staff time or a consultant resource to come in and do some of these things that aren't automated. So if it's a question of going through the crash reports, I don't know if there's again, it depends on what people report. But there, again, like with the rail, there may be a way to pull out that data separately. Again, depending on the reports though.
Yeah, I think something else that's also important to note is that once we're done with this plan, like as James stated, that we're gonna go ahead and start updating it in 3 to 5 years. We're gonna have to do that every 3 to 5 years until we reach that 2050 goal. So as reporting requirements change, as as different trends start, occurring with technology and the different modes of transportation, we can shift this, as time moves further. The other thing is that we are still going to have a oversight committee of some sort after this plan's done, that they may only meet once or twice a year. And the importance of that is that, between our emergency response folks and our enforcement folks, is that if there is this trend that's occurring, then maybe depending upon how often it's happening or how major of an issue it is, we could allocate different types of resources in the future.
So this is all really great feedback. If you have more comments, of course, on the crash data, please feel free to get back to us so we can kind of think about that a little bit more. I know my time for my section is running a little bit light, but I do want to get a few minutes in to talk about the implementation measures that we would need to collect from you all. So think about kind of look through these and let us know what your thoughts are. Again, these would be things as your construction projects are completed, that these would need to be reported on. So, like James said, he may have a resource available to help pull some of this information, but this is really going to be kind of a partnership amongst everybody to be able to get this, because this is really critical. We need to be able to show, we've done all these great things, all these great investments, and that those things are helping to bring down the KSIs. So being able to get this kind of information is going to be really important. So the how is one thing, and then the what is the other. So, as we're kind of looking at these, do you think that these are the right implementation measures that y'all are doing that will really show kind of how we're going to get to 0?
Also try to think about if any of these 9 things are easy to track. Are they easy for your staff to report on a yearly basis to the MPO or to the county? Are some of these priorities kind of impossible to track because it's may not be underneath the purview of one department at your respective agency too? Eric?
Just want to bring up that you're not going to consistently do all of these things every single year or in a way that shows, change every year. So it's just important that it's explained that, not all 9 of these are attacked at one point. You might have a giant, chunk in one and then nothing for 3 or 4 years, those types of situations. Like I love the speed cameras and the feedback signs. I love the feedback signs. The happy face is like the greatest thing in the world. But you don't do those really unless you're doing something to the road, so they go hand in hand, so I like it. I'm just saying that, we have to probably make some sort of caveat that not always everything's going to happen. I'm actually working on my annual report right now because, we adopted Vision Zero last year. So the report is due. I'm definitely dropping the word card, which you don't have to have. There's no set standard for the report, right? New York, I think does a really good job. New York City does a really good job, but everyone else, I don't know. I'll just say it's hard for me to not give myself an A. I'm never, I'm just joking. Anyway, it's really weird to self-evaluate and give yourself a grade. I don't know if that's fair. So I just think a report is better. Drop the word card because we're just explaining what happened last year, right? The other thing is that if we do action items, you should list all the action items that were completed the year prior and any new action items that were adopted. So like what Fazil was saying, like 3 to 5 years, that's when you look at new action items. And doing this, by the way, does count with SS4A as updating the 5-year plan, because you have to have the 5 years of data. So if you do the report every single year, like that counts. So it's important that we're doing the report every year. So I don't know who's going to be responsible for it, but I think Allison needs to be identified for, the annual report, right? And when it comes out. So like, just if you're going to do it in January, if you're going to do it every year from the adoption date or whatever, like that's just, how and when you're doing it. I guess that's my suggestion, drop the wood card.
Oh, that's really helpful. And having your experience kind of going through this is really helpful. And I think you're exactly right. Yeah, we're not going to do all of these every year in every city in the county, but that's okay because we're looking at what we have done. So we were talking kind of about, how we would report on this. Is it like, so the numbers are one thing, but then could we also, so we could maybe create like a web-based data portal where like those different things could, kind of be input as you're doing your projects. But could we also do GIS based so that from year to year, you could kind of like overlay and see like visually, like where are those improvements? And then that way you can kind of keep a running track. So whomever's putting the information in, there's a consistent way of kind of reporting and visualizing so that how is being worked out.
Yeah, I'm debating about having like a static, just a document that's sort of boring, and then like the graphic information page. And I guess really, if you go to New York City, their annual report is almost different every single year because of things that happened, right? So like, it's just, I think I said, it doesn't need to always look the same, doesn't always have the same information. It's just what you achieved the year before. So I think that's really the biggest thing.
Really good, thank you.
And Eric, something you said made me think of our partners. I don't know if everybody's aware, but 4 municipalities in Broward received funding to do a safety action plan this coming year. So it's Fort Lauderdale. Congratulations, Karen. Hollywood, Brick, Pompano Beach, and Oakland Park. And so we are coordinating with them. The idea that the feds wanted to avoid duplication of effort. So some of the cities came in with the scope and they wanted to develop a dashboard. And it's like, wait a sec, we're going to do the dashboard. You don't need to do a different dashboard. So any way that we can kind of help facilitate this, there were questions about, can a city come in then and download information just for their city? That's something we need to look into. I think there was a way to download an Excel file or something. Yeah, so there's different ways to do it, but the other thing too is the dashboard itself is not everything. So I'm glad, Eric, your conversation about the report, because there are certain things that can be attached separately. Karen?
I had a couple comments. I think maybe to manage it a little bit, just using that first bullet as your filter, like not trying to capture everything. Maybe just focus on the high injury network, and that'll make it easier. I know we're a NACTO member and they have a standard form that we fill out every year on their key things that they want to track. So if you send out a form to us each year and we kind of know what's coming and we keep track, like our crash statistics, we keep track of that for NACTO and ourselves. So we know what we need to quantify each year and be ready for that. I would say crosswalks, you don't have crosswalks in here, that's a huge thing for safety, and adding crosswalks to those corridors that are having the issues would be good. And then smaller traffic calming stuff, your neighborhood intrusion plan, if it's speed humps and pavement markings. I know Milos talked about it this morning, but we're doing a whole safety program with pavement markings and the difference that it makes when we're seeing our neighborhood crashes. If there's no stop bars, there's no center lines, and people are crashing into each other, and the safety that it's helping, center yellow lines that are slowing down vehicles, and we're doing before and after of that. So I think some of the smaller quick wins might be good measures too. And then the lighting, I don't know how you'll capture that with all the different parties involved, knowing when they upgrade one light versus another. If it's not project based, it would be a nightmare to keep track of, I think.
Yeah, and these are exactly the things that we need to know. It's nice to be able to think that we would like to do all of these, but we recognize that logistically it's going to be a little bit challenging. And we do just to make sure on the other page, we do have crosswalks highlighted. So, so I just flipped to that page so y'all could see that. But I think that's a really good point. Looking at some of those smaller neighborhood type speed management, we can definitely track those. So let me ask you this. So for the NACTO form that you fill out every year, do you fill out the crashes or do you also fill out like what type of construction projects, countermeasures that you've implemented?
So like the number of projects, the miles, our budget, things like that they're looking at, which might be a little bit more than we need to do for this, but higher level. And I don't know, to put Josette on the spot to talk about some of her experiences when she was the Fort Lauderdale Vision Zero coordinator of trying to capture that data. None of us are good at boasting about what we're doing. So it's like pulling teeth to try to get people to share their information and be proud of what they're, even if it's just a little thing. I know I emailed, there was a safety study DOT recently did, and I noticed there were about 4 pedestrian crashes every year in this corridor. But then last year there were none. So like, what happened? Was it because the LPIs got put in? Like what caused that? And so little things like LPIs like you have could make a huge difference in safety on that, but.
I think that's a great point, and I think that's also one of the reasons why we're thinking if we can do a visual, then, you know, it's hard to correlate one for one exactly, but if we can have like a GIS file that shows like where all those improvements were, and then we can look at the crashes and see, okay, like in this vicinity, have they been reduced? Then you can say, yeah, you know, what we're doing is working. Would it be, do we need to get to your section? Okay, we need to get to James' section. So this is a great kind of foundation for this conversation. So if y'all can be thinking about this a little bit more, we'll need to kind of like refine this as we move along in the next couple weeks. Okay.
Yeah,
Excellent.
so we're also gonna send out this presentation to you all. So if you all have any thoughts after this meeting, please read the presentation and please provide us constructive, feedback that we can try to take into account as we progress with this process of refining our report card requirements or what we want to track and whatnot. James.
Thank you. Okay. So you all have been very interactive, which we really appreciate, and we want to continue that pattern through the rest of the presentation. Desiree and Natasha will call you for some of the questions here too. So, but we want to talk about how we tell the story of safety, about how we give them messaging. And so I want to lay out a few different options, a few different ways of telling the story and get some feedback from you. When we talk about safety, all of us are talking to different people in different capacities. So some of us are educating our elected officials about what's going on with safety. We'll talk to the public talks to the electeds. It goes in circles. There's training for technical staff, so you can talk about things a little bit differently for people who are familiar with engineering and planning principles. And then this was a little more applicable this morning with some of our oversight committee members that represent community organizations and business groups, but even people here today, they can work with organizations. I know we can't advocate. I don't know if anybody that's here today, if through their organization, can you advocate? Paula? I don't know if you can. No? Okay. By the way, Paula's our new member from SFRTA. She was with FDOT's variety of different things. So anyway, okay. So with that, then I'm going to talk about some stuff and then come back and say, is this information, how would you share it with electeds, with public, with technical people and such? So first I want to start off with a historical perspective. Roads weren't always built for cars. Maybe 100, 120 years ago, before cars were predominant, roads served a variety of different functions. Streets, we even call them, it's where people went out, they set up vending stalls, they walked around, there was maybe interaction with the horses' carriages and the problems with manure pollution. But over 100 years ago, 120 years ago, cars started coming in and started to become more dominant on our roadways. And you can see the transition of how the people use the roads from these photos. And I'm going to thank Fossil for pulling some of this stuff together. Historically, one of the aspects of dealing with the roadways was who has the right to use the road. And so initially with the cars, it was like, how terrible, these cars are coming in and killing people and they're attacking us, and it was the cars at fault for killing people. The auto industry, though, did some, they've done a lot of different things. And so they did education, messaging, all these different things to make it clear that no, the problem is the people get in the way of the cars. And so it became a condition of, yeah, the roads are for cars to move around. Why are the people getting in the way? And so there was, newspaper stories were planted about blaming people as opposed to the cars and such. So that was a change in messaging that we can maybe counteract or do something similar. Similar with jaywalking. This idea of the pedestrians used to be just, you cross the street, that's just what you do. But then it became a question of peds getting in the way of cars, and peds should cross only at the signal when the light is green, and you're a fool if you're a hick, you're a jaywalker, you don't know what it is that you're doing at being in a city with cars. And so this became a kind of a marketing thing and an approach to tell people how to behave. So we could see over time that the cars then became a little bit more dominant on our roadways, and now we think of our streets and roads as a place for the movement and storage of vehicles. Only more recently, with the idea of complete streets, are we looking at roadways for all different types of users with different abilities. But even when I started doing bike planning 30 years ago, the thought of even asking for space on the road, we were like kind of begging permission. And now there are places where they give up car lanes for bicyclists and other uses. Back in the mid-60s, Ralph Nader put out a book called Unsafe at Any Speed. And it was a bit of a condemnation of the automobile industry, that the auto industry was not paying attention to the safety of the roadway users. In fact, the issue of, they had 3 E's back then: education, enforcement, and engineering. And it was about more roadway engineering as opposed to what the cars themselves were doing. And so Ralph Nader identified a certain number of issues that now we're like, we can't believe that wasn't part of what was going on. But like, the steering column that wouldn't collapse. And so if there was a crash, it would impale somebody and, take out their heart, or metal on the dashboard, and if you're in a crash and you hit your head, it's more like things sticking out and causing injuries, or windshields without tempered glass. And so if you're in a crash and you go through the windshield, coming back, all the glass will cut and cause you to bleed. So there's a lot of different things that were going on in terms of safety. And with the publication of this book, and it became a bestseller in the mid to late 60s, the federal government started looking at applying regulations for cars and making them safer for users. So seatbelts became mandatory in 1968. I remember my father back then, we were doing our first trip to Disneyland, and we bought a new car, and he was installing the seatbelts because they weren't even in the car. This is in 68. And so but they're now mandatory. Airbags became an option, different things, restraint systems. I mean, I always want to raise hands. How many people remember just as kids standing up in the back seat versus having to be strapped in and into a baby seat, for like the kids these days, they're just so precious. So anyway, airbags started, I'm sorry, but we were cute, but we were expendable. So anyway, the airbags were coming in earlier, but they became mandatory in the 90s. And now in this century, we talk about the technologies and connected vehicles and sensors and controls and automatic parking and different things, and the cars that will brake themselves and let you know if you're going above the speed limit. So there's different things that have made the vehicles safer. Another thing that went on, and Rick, I'm going to prime you for your story, but another thing is about public action that has caused change. So again, some of you might remember before, drinking and driving was a problem, but then Mothers Against Drunk Driving came out. These issues about don't drink and drive, have a designated driver, somebody that's not, that it's hard to imagine a world where that wasn't a concern, but it's because of this group that it became an important issue. Rick, I want you to tell a little bit about what happened with the introduction of school zones in Broward.
Well, I guess this is a story about how a large agency was the Florida Department of Transportation had a standard showing what you needed to do for school crossings and that sort of thing. And this is back in probably about the late 1980s. I don't remember the exact sequence of events, but we had standards, which in my opinion are all minimums. And most of the time you need to go beyond that. But nevertheless, we've been asked to put up a reduced speed zone on Hallandale Beach Boulevard for a school crossing west of Dixie Highway. It's pretty, 6-lane divided highway. Back then it was a little less congested, so the speeds were probably higher. But the policy based on our standards would say, no, we can't do that. I was asked to attend a school board meeting, and there were about 300 people there that were quite upset with me beating the standard, dialogue for about a half an hour or so, but that was the answer at the time. And this was something that was done on kind of a statewide basis. Not long after that, early in one of the school years, there was a little boy crossing the street. His mom was beside him. He was being assisted by a crossing guard at the intersection that was in the same area, and he was run over by a car that ran a red light. And that kind of raised a lot of eyebrows and concerns, and we ended up changing our standard to allow the school zones to blanket signalized intersections. And the first one that was in Broward that was on a state road was actually inherited because it was on Sterling Road near Hollywood Hills High School. The county widened Sterling and Griffin Road simultaneously in about 87. And after the widening was done, they put them on the state highway system. So we kind of inherited one, and that was kind of like an eyesore because we said no in every other case until this tragic event happened. The boy's name was Ramon Turnquist. Legislation was enacted in his name that gave us the ability to do that now. So we started out with about 8 school zones at locations that seemed to be most active, and now it's more or less a standard treatment. So again, the philosophy was once cars are going 0 at an intersection, you don't have to worry about slowing them down, but they don't always stop at the intersection. And unfortunately, it was a tragic event that changed the mindset of a very large agency, and now we have a pretty good system out there.
And when that fatality occurred, the action happened pretty quickly.
It did happen pretty quickly, yeah. I don't remember exactly how long it happened, but I was actually asked to come up with to work on a design project to have a consultant design 8 school zones. They're near high schools, one up on Sample Road by the high school there, Coral Springs, wherever it is. Hollywood, there were a couple on US 1. So they were all over the place, but now it's pretty common to have that done, and they're pretty obedient. I think the motorists are, but even still, the ones with the flashers their compliance is pretty good. There are millions of, well, not millions, but many out there that just have static signs that you can't read, even if you're standing in front of it. So our police department last year started putting out the electronic speed enforcement cameras. I don't know how many. They've deployed everything almost on the city streets. They're waiting for permission to get a couple out on county and state facilities, but that makes a big difference. And I almost ran one last week as I was running home in a panic attack, but I looked at the time of day and slowed down. So I think that's going to help, and maybe some more enforcement through the red light program. Hollywood had it for a while. They took them off the street for some reason. It's probably more administrative than safety based, but I think they're looking at putting it back on again.
So at this point, with that historical perspective, there are ways things happen and people their mindset can be influenced, regulations can come in, different things can happen. Thinking about the safety messaging, how would you tell an elected official about this? You need to be able to sit down and have time to tell a story. I think I won't mention the names, but we heard from one elected official said that nobody ever has explained why these are big issues. So they're just reacting to project requests without understanding the background of why we're doing it. In terms of speaking with the public or technical staff or organizations, I think that was an important one too, with like Mothers Against Drink Driving. So any thoughts on how you might want to share this information if this is it's good background, but it's kind of hard to sit down with somebody and get them to listen to the history. Any thoughts? Josette?
A graphic is good for everybody, or if you can narrow it down to like a 2-minute video, that could be good to share too.
Interesting. Yeah. Timelines and such. Yeah. Okay.
So I was at the Safe States Alliance conference in Portland in 24, and we had an entire section at the conference on talking to our elected officials about public health messaging.
Yeah.
And they essentially said that we should do it as like an elevator pitch. So you call their office, you let them know that you want to talk to them about something, make sure that it's relevant to them in their community, and then have a really quick 2-minute spiel prepared on why it matters, and just say, even if you're just like, I'm a concerned citizen, I want to talk to you about XYZ, have your little pitch ready and then say, I'd love to schedule more time to talk to you about this, and outline some of the details and our next steps.
Okay.
And that usually gets you in the door with them.
Give them some bait and then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to come to an elevator pitch later on in the presentation. So what started off as an elevator pitch. So, okay, let's keep going. Statistics. There's a way we can tell a story with statistics. So over the last 50 years, there have been improvements in terms of traffic fatalities based on vehicle miles traveled, 100 million VMT. But generally we're averaging over 40,000 fatalities a year, even with all the safety improvements. Unfortunate. Traffic fatalities inside vehicles on the bottom graph, the green dotted line, has decreased a little bit with the fatalities inside a vehicle and has increased a bit for people outside of vehicles. So statistics. Looking at Broward, what are the statistics there? Over a 5-year period, over, 1,000 people killed, 4,700 seriously injured. 77% of crashes are on our high entry network. That's about 6% of our roadways, 384 miles there. A third of pedestrian crashes near schools and parks. That tells us something maybe about children and their activity near schools and parks, and maybe other age groups too. Pedestrian KSIs are much higher probability on a 6-lane street versus 2-lane. There's also the question of volumes of traffic in that regard too. And then crashes happening at night or outside intersections. It's almost a 50-50 split there of daytime, nighttime, and inside and outside intersections. So I'm not sure what all that tells us. And then there's another way we can talk about statistics in terms of the CABCO calculation of the economic impact of a death or a serious injury. And with those numbers based on our KSIs over a 5-year period, there's about $14.2 billion in economic impact. That can help as we consider cost-benefit analyses. More statistics as we look at the United States compared to other developed countries. We're doing a lot worse in terms of the death rate. Places in Europe and other areas are half to a third of the rates that we have. What is it is this just a shocking thing that kind of try to get people's attention or, so. And then as we talk about Vision Zero, we have a goal, we have an aspiration. Places around the world that do have Vision Zero goals. I mean, I love this in Spain that they have an 80% reduction in fatalities. They're not to zero, but they're doing much better than they were. Mexico City, even almost 20% reduction, so there's a question of setting goals and working towards something. And even if you don't achieve the Vision Zero goal, you're making progress. You ready, Fazil? Just want to share this. There's a way to tell statistics or to tell the story a little differently.
So last year, 213 people died on our roads. What do you think would be a more acceptable number?
Acceptable? 70 maybe? Probably 70.
Can you send 70? Actually, this is what 70 people looks like.
It's my family.
So now, what do you think would be a more acceptable number?
0. 0.
So some of you may have seen that. There's an American version. There's a Spanish version. I don't know why we have the British version on our website, but that's what's there. So have people seen this before? Yeah. And I think it's very powerful. So we can tell stories with numbers, or we can appeal to emotion or combine it. And so at the federal level, the current Secretary of Transportation has talked about the goal for our transportation system is 0 deaths. So the USDOT legitimized the Vision Zero goal. We'll see what happens with the new administration, but there is this idea that the transportation is bipartisan. And so, we'll see how this plays out. So in terms of sharing numbers about zero and goals and how to approach it, sure, I don't have that slide that talks about electeds and all, but any thoughts on how you tell that story? I think, Rachel, you had a great thing there about an elevator pitch. If you can stop an elected official or somebody with a little video on the elevator.
So when I think about, I'm a public health person, right? So it's a little bit different than the way that you see data. I deal with data all day long, but it's different. And that slide you had, that initial slide you had, that was like the US leads the country in It was that one. The United States leads the country in motor vehicle death rates. So I think that if you guys talked about years of potential life lost in your metrics, that would speak to more people. So right now, this is just an alarming statistic that we deal with in the United States. But in public health, we have a metric, it's the YPLL, and we look at years that people are not contributing to society, they're not working, so the 0 to 45, that's the number one cause of death is traumatic injury. And we know that, and we study that in the trauma centers. When you think about years that you're not able to contribute to that next generation or contribute to society, give back, have a working role, that speaks to people, because then we start having these extreme age gaps in our culture. So maybe including that metric is something we can include in our report not card, and in our, right? And just include that as something that would speak to our elected officials. There's an algorithm for it. Like there's like a formula online that we would kind of pull the data into. It's years of potential life lost. And there's a few other metrics in that same realm that I can look up and get them for you, but it's kind of like your ability to contribute to society in essence. And if you're injured, or if you get into a really bad motor vehicle crash at, let's say, 25, you could then become more of like a burden to your family than a contributing member of that family. You don't make it to that next phase of life. You're not working. You're not in the workforce. Or the burden to, I mean, for lack of other words, the burden to society of caring for you in the healthcare system, that type of thing.
I was gonna say, like, that's a great point. I think 18 to 24, the number one cause of death is a crash. Yeah. Which is, yeah. So, and I'm a 21 to 20-year-old. So it's like those things like it make me crazy. But so like so we've done some of that social media stuff where you're kind of pushing those things. You do like the back to school, summer's out kind of stuff, and you kind of hit some of those things. And that's the stuff that makes the parents recognize it, because it can all become white noise with social media and everything. So I know it sounds really bad, but like we really toyed with doing this, like enjoy your holiday because someone's missing their loved one thing. And and we just, we did a piece on our website about a crash. It's like 6 minutes long. It's way too long, but it's just like heartbreaking about the woman who died and all this kind of stuff. But that's a big part of what we're talking about too, is that the social aspect.
Yeah, so James, so are you fine if I open it up to the people that are online?
Yeah, if they have anything, if Desiree or Sasha or.
So Celia, Desiree, or Sasha, if you want to state anything, feel free to unmute yourself, and we'll give you a second.
Okay. Is that okay for me to speak?
Who's this? Yes, Desiree, it is.
Okay, all right.
All right. What we were thinking of is having our trauma surgeon or one of us from our education department, we could do like a presentation and post it on our different various social media platforms so that others could see what we have seen as far as pedestrian injuries over a period of time and what we could do to prevent that.
And Desiree, this is James. So some people here may or may not be aware that you and Sasha do a lot of outreach, as does Rachel, to the different communities. So dealing with safety or dealing with various elements of safety. Did we have the conversation, or was that with Sasha about
With Sasha.
targeting the message to the
Sasha, go ahead and.
that Rachel?
Yes, I'm here, James.
Yeah, so if any of you want to talk about that in terms of targeting that message, I think we were hitting on it a little bit. So go ahead, Sasha or Desiree. And
Yeah.
like you do safety outreach for a variety of different, so it's not just roadway, but you're doing.
No, correct. We go to safety fairs, we do stop to bleed events at high schools. In the community, yeah. But one of the things that we were talking about, did you already talk about that? Oh, okay. Would be the big thing is, like maybe having one of our trauma doctors and via social media, because social media is, the best way to reach like the whole community, rather than just going to schools and stuff, which is also great, but hearing it from one of the trauma doctors and getting statistics and kind of injuries that we see, you know, with pedestrian, whether it's, you know, MBAs or pedestrians hit by cars or whatever. And then
Motorcyclists.
yeah, motorcyclists, which is what we see, and then how we can prevent it. And then rope in what, you know, we've been doing within this group to help improve that.
No. Anybody over on this side too, any thoughts on?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I
Paula.
just want to mention, you know, my previous work, working with the community as well, community traffic safety. A lot of the coalitions have a lot of information, you know, they've done a lot of the research, have a lot of videos and such, which are geared towards specific population. When you talk about motorcycle, I was on that coalition as well. So like if you're looking for something that's going to reach the riders, you know, or whatever it is, whatever issue we're facing here in Broward, I think reaching out to the coalitions, teen driver safety, there's the occupants protection, and they're doing a lot of work. And I think I believe, you know, they're FDOT funded. So they're key partners if we're not already working with them to just see, you know, and what their approaches are in reaching different targets, whether it's elected officials out there in the community as well, reaching, even having victims, surviving victims, of course, as spokespeople as well, helping in the mission. So I think a lot more could be done with the coalitions.
No, and that's really good input. One reason why we try to be very diverse in our technical work group and oversight committee is sometimes we just reach out to the same folks. Nothing against everyone that we normally work with, but once we try to also get a wider perspective, because we don't know all the different partners, we don't know all the different or non-normal organizations that we normally conduct business with. So Paula, if you could help us connect to some of these coalitions and organizations, I mean, we can definitely look into doing some reach out to them and seeing what we can, you know, hopefully accomplish or provide them that could help them with their messaging and whatnot.
And on our oversight committee, we have some business groups. So we have somebody from the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance, and that's a group that has been advocating like for transportation funding and they can be helpful outreach in terms of safety and economic attractiveness of this area. I mean, to be crass, but you know.
So I totally agree on the coalitions. I actually sit on the Florida Occupancy Protection Coalition Board, so I'm happy to bring anything back. Our next meeting is February 11th or 12th and 13th. So happy to bring anything, and it's a quarterly meeting. The only thing I would kind of hone in on too is I found the most success in my community education by tailoring to the audience. So not just age, but also just the demographic as a whole. Like if I'm educating teenagers, then I want to make sure that it is relevant to them, right? I want to get the topic that matters to them, and I address it that way. If I'm speaking to senior drivers, it's a totally different tactic. And we know that they get injured in different ways and for different reasons, right? So that's why if we focus on the audience specifically, I think we have a lot more of an impact.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. We talked a little bit about speed, that depending on the speed one is going, there's different reaction time, different braking distance, different cone of sight, depending on how quickly you're moving and being able to see what's surrounding you or not. There's a statistic or graphic here that I like that showed, well, I don't like the message, but I like the display of, you know, depending on the speed, the level of injury to a person who is hit or is in an accident, in a crash of that type. Sorry. Crash, I said. And then the question of having speeds be appropriate for the condition and the level of injury that might be possible. We don't have proof, but we have an impression that in Broward, when it says only 77% of fatal or serious injuries, crashes are coded as speeding related, we think that's maybe underreported. At a federal level, there's an estimate of up to 60% of fatalities may be speeding related. And there are, you know, other statistics about where there's speeding or aggressive driving, 3 times more likely to result in KSI. So there's a question of the relation of speed and moving people safely and throughput of vehicles. Coming more on the statistical side, which I think this is maybe more attractive for technical staff, different graphics that show, you know, the risk of serious injury or death based on the speed one is going, and then also increases in speed and the level of injury or severity of the crash. So there's different ways to tell the story. I think if anybody doesn't have any thoughts on, or if anybody has any thoughts on this, but I think it's like Rachel said, targeting, like personally, I like these graphics, but Fazil as an engineer likes these data heavy tables. So, you know, any thoughts from anybody on those? And what I'm hoping is when you talk, Rachel, about having information able to share, I'm hoping that this presentation, you may be able to pull it out different pieces for different audiences that you talk to. So any thoughts there? Okay. If not, then I want to take a more holistic approach too, that it's not just a question of understanding the history and the goal of what we want to achieve, but how are we going to achieve it? And so it used to be that we talked about the ease of engineering, education, enforcement, you know, emergency services, which is important, and moving more toward a holistic approach about making all the different elements safer. And so it's a different approach also in terms of not blaming the individual and expecting perfect drivers, and that, you know, that it's too hard to, it's expensive to do this, looking at the idea of traffic deaths being preventable, and maybe we're emphasizing trying to reduce serious injury and death crashes as opposed to all crashes, that it's a systemic approach and that it's not necessarily expensive. There can be a lot of low cost, high impact improvements. So one thing with the safe system approach is it shares responsibility and shares the different approaches, that it's not the view of, if we just had enforcement, that would solve everything, or if we just had people that paid attention to the rules, you know. So it's looking at things from a holistic perspective, and that all the pieces work together. And so ideally that, you know, all the things, there's some redundancy in the system, but the redundancy eliminates a point of failure where a serious injury or crash could occur. And this is, I don't know, with Sasha and Desireen, with the healthcare side, we talk a lot about the emergency response and post-crash care, and trying to avoid those crashes actually occurring. I don't know if there's any health perspective that you want to give on that, or if anybody else has any comments on this. Yeah, I personally found this Swiss cheese graphic a little bit more my style to tell the story, but I know Christine loves to tell this story in terms of all the different elements. This isn't quite an elevator pitch, but it's in a presentation. Hey, I have people's attention, so I'm going to tell this story. So, okay. Or what? Or the dial? Oh, I'm sorry. Which do you think would be more effective in talking to your elected officials? The dial or the Swiss cheese? Swiss cheese? And why? It's kind of like a bite-sized graphic, as opposed to this is like a buffet, like I don't know where to start. So.
I'd say that the Swiss cheese shows the redundancy really well, while the other round one is great for depicting on what the components are. So to me, they're different and they're good to be used together.
And I think they accurately show everything on both of them, but Swiss cheese is quirky, so people will remember that. No, yeah.
Did you guys make this up? I don't know where this came from. Okay, maybe from Vision Zero Group. So, okay. So another way of telling the story is an elevator pitch. And this presentation was something that I'll be sharing with the TAC and CAC coming up next week. Christine, we talked a little bit about before an event, we're going to be seeing elected officials. What can we tell them in 30 seconds? And so she came up with these concepts. And then I thought, maybe this is a way to tell the story about kind of what's happening with the safety action plan. Quite often we talked about, we have a process and we got this funding and we're doing these 11 quarters and, you know, okay. But what is it that can relate to an elected official or somebody from the public in Miramar or Weston or Parkland or Deerfield or Hollywood, you know, so I think it's general enough that people can kind of apply it to the situation that they know about. So there are 4 major themes that have kind of encapsulate what it is that we're coming up with the safety action plan. First, lighting. The graphic on the top shows that around dusk is when we have the highest number of KSIs per day. And it varies by time of year and it varies by daylight saving time change and such. So consistently, even though the exact time is different, but it's around dusk where we're having the highest number of KSI crashes per day. My assumption as we started this effort was that the issue is that there's not lighting. That's why, you know, the crashes are occurring. But as we look at the map, the dark not lighted, there are many fewer KSIs than on the map that shows that it's dark with some light. And so Selena Saman on the team here did some analysis, and the idea is that there's light, but it may not be light in the right place. So there's some standards now about how to install lighting at intersections where there are 4 signals at each corner to illuminate the intersection. And then approaches to the crosswalks, lighting in such a way that drivers can see somebody who is in the crosswalk itself prior to coming up to the crosswalk. So this is something that any member of the public, any city staff, technical staff can see, hey, this is how this applies in my city. Next thing is bus stop location. And again, this is Broward Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale, east of 95. But I think we see this pattern in many places where you have bus stops that are located along a corridor. Some are located near signalized intersections, and some are not. Some are mid-block. And so when somebody is taking a bus in one direction at the start of the day, when they go back, they might have to cross the street to get to the other one. And are they always necessarily going to cross at a signalized intersection? We can see with the graphs below, you know, the all crashes are kind of spread along the corridor, but when we look at the KSI crashes, there's an unfortunate, I don't want to say causation, but there is a relation of where some of those crashes are occurring in the bus stop location. So what are we going to do about that? We have been, thanks to Mintang and some of the others, and Antigone, we've been able to work with our partners at BCT where they said, well, let's locate where there are issues. Let's look at whether we can relocate some of those bus stops and or create mid-block crossings where there aren't now. So that's a conversation that's been going on. We really appreciate that interaction that's been going on. Speeding is another concern. Again, we've talked about some of these graphics already about the level of injury based on the speed and you know how speeding can affect our driving. And what we have from that in terms of addressing speeding are different countermeasures, different ingredients that can apply on different roadways based on their context, based on the speed limits, different things that can happen. And so we may not be doing some of these things now, but we can look at, is it possible to change a context classification and or lower a speed limit so that that we can do some raised intersections or tables or things of that sort to try to encourage slower speed. So it's not just a question of changing the speed limit sign, but it's a combination of elements that encourage the roadway users to move at that slower speed. And then finally, technology is one of an overarching thing. So we've talked about some of the photo enforcement near school zones and with red lights. You know, there's ways that our roadways don't have to be the same 24 hours a day. We have enough technology that we can change speed limits, we can close lanes, we can do different things. I have this vision out here at Cypress Creek and Andrews that on the weekends, there's hardly anybody here and there's so much road space. Could we make those bike lanes on the weekends? I know there are issues, but you know, the technology is there. Okay. Or other things we can do there, and we're getting to more technology about connected vehicles, autonomous sensors, different things of that sort, near miss technologies, things that can inform us and help us make the roadways safer for the future. So in terms of an elevator pitch, I took a little longer than it was a long elevator ride there, but just hitting some of these key elements. Does that sound like a good approach? It was a death drop elevator. That's it. Okay. But anyway, any thoughts on using that? Because this is something that, as I've shared it with people, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense about the lighting. Oh, that makes sense about the bus stop. So feel free to steal this. Mike?
And as we've been talking about this, I guess at some point it's like, Yeah, I totally agree. I buy into everything you're saying. What do I need to do? Right. So the next thing is what's the call to action? So if it's in trying to message that to the different audiences, whether it's a public or an elected official.
Okay, hold on to that thought. We'll come back to that. Karen?
I was going similar to kind of what's the problem? I think this is a little much, honestly, for doing a pitch to elected official. It's kind of all over the place, but
The four or the overall thing?
overall, what
Well, yeah, these are pieces. Yeah, what piece
So
works better
just
for?
clearly, what's the problem? Like some of your initial data, what's the problem? How you're gonna address it real high level, like the different, like you're just doing these high level things, and then what does it mean for the city? Like what's the city gonna get out of it? Or what do you need from that commissioner? Very simple. You have 10 minutes of attention. That's it. So making sure it's brief and concise of what it is, and then if they're engaged within those few minutes, then you can get more conversation, but it has to be quick, and charts and graphs, not necessarily good. Pictures better.
For sure. And just thinking about that, right? The four topics that James brought up, or those four topics at the speed, the lighting, the bus stops, and the technology. We can either approach it that we lay out, these are four themes that are, I think, a little bit more understandable, right, from our elected officials and from residents, or we can pick four themes that might be a larger, bigger issue, but they may be a lot more difficult to combat, right? So those are a couple things that that as we're having this discussion, if you all can also think about which approach might be better, one over the other, and so on.
Eric?
About the action items, like what are we going to try to do for the county, for the cities?
So I appreciate Mike bringing up that question, Karen. Initially, this idea was we talked to different people. How is it that we can tell this story in different ways? And as Rachel was saying, understanding what the audience is. But I'm glad that this group is thinking, and it ties back to part of the conversation that we had earlier about what are we going to be asking at our city levels. And so part of this is we talked to our elected officials, and we won't get into the detail here, but we were anticipating, like, you know, what are some of the questions that come up that we hear from the general public? Why are you doing bike lanes when, you know, they're not safe, or people are speeding anyway, or, you know, they get in my way. They need to not be distracted driving, all the different things. So it's a kind of a multifaceted approach. So ultimately, we're going to ask our elected officials to take action and approve a plan or approve projects or approve policies and regulations. Part of that then is working with the technical staff at our local levels to be able to tell them the story of why we're doing this. So you're going to tell the story a little bit differently to the technical people. To the public, we go out to the meetings and people will say things, and being able to respond in an intelligent manner and you know, address the concerns. But also public will call our elected officials. And I know I've talked to several of you that have tried different approaches, and then the public gets all upset about it, and then the elected officials cancel it, you know. So that there's that aspect of prepping our electeds to what may be coming in and out of this. And then again, with some of our other groups and with Paula and some of these others, some of our outside groups that can advocate, you know, can talk to the elected officials in a different way and help and package a story for them to tell. So it's all kind of coming at different levels.
I was gonna say, I mean, graphics without text is always the easiest thing for anyone to understand. And the Swiss cheese is great, but the actual circle, when we're really talking to our technical groups and we're talking to our departments, that's actually the most important, because then that's when they recognize what their role in the game is and how you build like the coalition, you know. And so like keeping people, like in my transportation working group in the city, you know, we include all these different people in the group, and they're like, well, why am I here? And you explain their one little piece that they have to work on. It's a large piece for them. It's a little piece of the pie, you know, those kind of things. I've actually taken this and done it as a Trivial Pursuit, you know, the little Trivial Pursuit piece.
Yeah.
And that's what it looks like to me. That's what it always reminds me of. And so I kind of like put a little piece in the pie, and I'm like, this is you, and you're completing it. That's the other visual that I like.
You know, Trivial Pursuit? Okay,
okay, never mind. So there was a game we used to play.
I know that's okay. So part of the story today too, and the interaction that we had this morning and this afternoon, is helping us also understand how we're going to tell the story in this document too. how are we going to package the information? So what is it? What's the best way to kind of tell that? And we're also anticipating we can, help maybe develop presentations or such. Fazil mentioned that for the Complete Streets team, was it Complete Streets? Complete Streets Initiative, they had developed a set of frequently asked questions, and here's a good way to respond to them. So there's a question of hearing from you, and what are some of the resources that can be helpful in terms of presenting that. So I appreciate the feedback about catch their attention, present it in such a way that you're going to have limited time, but also then being clear. And I think the presentation ended up being like that. It's okay, here's history, here's problems, here's an approach, and then what are the recommendations? So Rachel, you had a hand up?
Rule, like we try and keep like language very simple, like an 8th grade type of reading level, comprehension level. And I don't know that every layperson or even elected official understands this language quite the same way you guys do. Like this is like, it's like its own, it's definitely its own language. And I don't think that everyone will understand it. So I would simplify completely, like not use all the technical terminology and just be very simple in your language as you're delivering it. Like we have, pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers injured on our roads. Like they don't think they understand all the technical jargon you guys use. And I would just use the steps that way to lay it out. So it's relevant to them. You've got the simple points and then the actionable steps.
I was thinking whoever was mentioned, it was over there, wasn't it? You did, I think, about the impact. We talk about that $14.2 billion in economic impact. That's a lot of money. Okay, but what does that mean for an individual? Well, if somebody has a loss of life, that's a $3 to $9 million impact, $10 million because loss of income,
like that 14.
impact in the family, and so you bring it to one person and then you multiply it by.
But like also it's your audience, right? So like if you're talking about like economic impact to your city, that would matter. That big number matters to them. Whereas if you're trying to reach the lay public, that single life is their loved one, right? So it's your audience.
And
And
I like the speaker you guys had for Christopher's event and talking about every time, pick on Christopher Day, how she talked about when you send your child out in the car and you fear every time. And like, what does it mean for you? Because the roads are so unsafe, it's scary to get on 95 and go home today because you're worried if you're going to get hit. So what does it mean to you? There's only 2 times a month I go on 95 and it's coming up here. But what does it mean to you? How does it affect you? Anybody who's driving into downtown on Monday morning, there was a fatality on 95 and it took down 95 and it made Fort Lauderdale gridlock everywhere because everybody diverted onto local streets. So what does it mean to me on a daily basis? The people who die are like other people. Everybody's that's other people. That's not me. So I think trying to message it that way is helpful.
And again, I'll reiterate though that there are different target audiences. So, our FDOT partners, they go have a meeting, they're going to have a different level of conversation, familiarity with acronyms and, compared to a public meeting in the auditorium across the driveway there. So.
I'd like to add, if you're talking to decision makers, commissioners, mayors, I'd say really do your research before having a briefing or one-on-one with them because they all have different positions on things and you're going to want to tailor your conversation to things that interest them. Like Karen was saying, and like Rachel and others have been saying, is you just really need to tailor it to your audience because what's in it for me is going to be the bottom line.
And I just thought of something too, that it's not only the commissioners, but their aides and their staff and the doorkeepers. I mean, is that an experience that you've had too? Like you need to be able to explain it to, it used to be Sophia Lee, who was the mayor's assistant,
Anymore.
I know, but that idea of telling the story, you can tell it at different levels. The staff might be a little more technical than the elected. So, all right. I appreciate everybody's time. We didn't get to cover some of the things about, like I said, about some of the questions. I do want to throw out, this is one of, again, Fazil's favorites, unfortunately. this idea of how do we tell the story about there's a crash on one of the rail lines and the newspaper says train hits car, and it's like, well, wait a sec, the train was on a line. Why'd the car get in the way? And so there's all these different headlines that make it sound like car was just minding its own business and the train came and hit it, as opposed to vehicle gets stuck. I guess I was out of town, but I guess there was a terrible crash in Del Rey. Why? I just really? Yeah, I hadn't heard about that. So, but again, there's a lot of different ways to tell the story, and that's maybe some of the reaction. You go to a public meeting and everybody gets upset about the train hitting people, but Karen?
Media, I had written down and I forgot, like trying to educate media on telling the story. I was
Yeah.
in DC at one point and they were talking about how something had happened on the highway and that was because there was less traffic and that caused people to speed. Like they told the whole story and I was amazed at it. And so certain markets get it. And I imagine that's because somebody took the time to educate those reporters about the whole story. So if there's opportunity to get some of the media, and I've heard like Channel 7 is a lot better and community-based stuff. Yeah, we were going to do a ride-along at one point, I think, and stuff. So if they can understand the story and that, not just report, oh, somebody got hit, oh, somebody died, and then that's the end of it, to tell more of a story around it would be really, I think, impactful to the larger community.
And you reminded me, we talked about how are we going to use this in terms of getting approval and authorization to take action and packaging the information in our report. But we also are going to have policies and programs in addition to project recommendations as part of this plan. And part of that does include that coordination with different groups, what Paula used to be with and others. And so that's something we can look to, because I know Fossil wanted to just send this to the sunset and I'll say, don't do that anymore, but I don't know if they're going to listen. So there's probably an approach that's good.
Cutter actually has a marketing and media training on how to talk about traffic crashes.
Cutter does?
Yeah, I'll forward it to you all. I'm pretty sure it's free. It's definitely worth doing the training. I guess marketing has a very long one that they can do. But there's a short one, maybe a couple hours that you can do as well. It's pretty insightful.
And we'll make note of this too. The MPO has some funding that we set aside for training. And so maybe we can bring somebody down and host something like that. That'd be good. I guess there's virtual options too, but there is an idea of the interaction of a group and getting feedback from others. So, all right, hand it over to Christine.
So we were back together on February 19th, and then in March, and then in April. I think we have meetings scheduled out on your calendars through July. So excited to see you back. Next month, we're going to be talking about kind of the summaries and the outputs of our focus plans, our 8 focus plans. So we'll be getting into the details about kind of what came out of the actions that came out of those 8 plans. So we'd really love to hear from you, have you there. So look forward to seeing you next month. Take care.